The Heat made some roster moves over the weekend. Did they make the right choice, or was there another young prospect who might have made the team better? We'll answer that for you before we make our bold prediction for the seasons and how Miami will finish the year off. Great episode to get you ready for the NBA action on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg. Joining me as always, it's David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. A fun show for you today. We're making our bold predictions for the Heat this season, but before we get to that, we do have some roster news to get to. The Heat have promoted Drew Smith to the 15-man roster, and they signed Cole Swider to a two-way contract. This also means that Jamal Cain, after an impressive preseason, remains on that two-way contract. So, David, we've been talking about this looming decision all preseason long, in particular that battle between Drew Smith and Jamal Cain for Miami's 14th and final roster spot, because they're not going to fill up the 15 in full. Your thoughts on the Heat going with Drew Smith over Jamal Cain?
It was a safe move. You see what Spo and the coaching staff has said about Drew Smith all preseason long, and I think it was virtually a lock. He had to have really done far more horrendously than he actually did to have lost that spot. It wasn't an inspired choice, but it was a safe one. Again, you've got two actual point guards on the roster in Kyle Lowry and Drew Smith, and whether Miami runs an offense that is, dedicated to the point guard position, or if it really needs a true point guard or anything like that, doesn't really matter. They still feel more comfortable with somebody who can set the table, get things organized to a certain degree, and they feel comfortable that Smith can handle that role in a much more reduced level than even Lowry can. I don't think Lowry's going to get a lot of playing time. I think Drew Smith is going to get even less. I think they're probably going to run a lot of sets out there without a true point guard, without either of those two players.
Yeah, with Josh or Tyler.
Yeah, or Bam or Jimmy or somebody else. We'll see what happens. But I think they have other options that they probably feel more comfortable with. But this was a choice that they felt most comfortable in terms of actually addressing a positional need. And I think they really do like him. Spo had some really complimentary things to say about him in a recent press conference. He's a guy who can get you set and plays defense and won't make mistakes.
He always makes the right basketball play, which is Eric Spoelstra talk for he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He might as well be. It's a huge compliment coming from him. You're right, and not only was it a positional need at that point guard spot, which is where Drew Smith plays, but they didn't really need a lot of help in that forward spot, which is where Jamal Cain plays. Right, you've got Haywood Highsmith, you've got Caleb Martin, you've got Jimmy Butler, you've got Jaime Jaquez Jr., you've got Nikola Jovic, you've got a full season of Kevin Love. There wasn't a whole lot of need there at that forward position either. So even if you did promote Jamal Cain to the 15-man roster, he probably wasn't going to play a whole lot more than he would on this two-way, right? Because he could still play for you 50 games on this two-way contract. So I think that, and then Drew Smith, if there's an injury to Kyle Lowry, Drew Smith is going to be playing every time that Kyle Lowry doesn't play, right? Because he's just going to be in that rotation. I mean, we know how Spo does things. He could start those games. You know what I mean? He started those games last year, right? So I think that's part of it. I will say this. I don't think that this is a detriment to Jamal Cain. I don't think that this has anything to do with that. In fact, I actually think that this means that the Heat really like Jamal Cain going forward, because one of the things here, and this was reported by both Anthony Chang from the Miami Herald, Ira Winderman, and the Sun Sentinel, were on this right away. And it's such a great point that by moving Drew Smith into the regular roster, and he's got a guaranteed contract. It's a partially guaranteed contract. Only $400,000 of it is guaranteed, and it's guaranteed on opening night. So by Wednesday night, he'll be guaranteed, and anything after that, you can waive him, and it's not going to hurt your cap. Why does that matter? Because if somebody gets bought out mid-season, Drew Smith's probably the guy that gets waived, because the Heat can always obviously make that player their 15th player, but they don't want to do that for luxury tax reasons. They don't want to carry 15 guys. They'd rather carry 14 guys. So you can always waive Drew Smith and then sign a veteran on the buyout market. And then, of course, Drew Smith has to go through the waiver process, so you can lose him. And that happened last year, right? Drew Smith ended up playing for the Brooklyn Nets. So we've seen this already happen. If they like Jamal Cain, and I suspect they do very much like Jamal Cain, having him on that two-way actually reduces the need that risk of losing him, because you could just keep him on that two-way, even if you go and sign somebody on that veteran buyout. And then you can kind of look forward and say, all right, well, if you're going to lose Caleb Martin, potentially lose Haywood Highsmith as a restricted free agent, even this summer, you're going to really need Jamal Cain going forward, even though I think right now the more immediate need is Drew Smith because of the positions that they play. So both of them still on the roster. Just Drew Smith is on the 15-man roster. Jamal Cain on that two-way. Congrats to Cole Swider. It was pretty obvious that he was going to be the guy that filled in the vacated two-way spot with whoever got promoted. So those are the roster moves.
A couple more too. They waive Justin Champagny.
They waive them. They were like not even really waived. Like they were E10 guys. Like they training camp's over. Like goodbye. They're all going to be Sioux Falls. Right. Champagny, Check Diallo, and then before that was Alondis Williams and Drew Peterson. Like these guys are all going to end up in Sioux Falls. But yeah, important.
We'll see them down the road though. Like this is not as fatalistic as a lot of people make it seem. I know social media reacted very poorly to the announcement about Drew Smith, but all these guys are still in the system. They're still part of the group, and I think they all have a chance to succeed. They've seen what Miami does with these guys. You could be a two-way guy. You could be at Sioux Falls 1 year, 2-3 years down the road, you might be making north of $10 million a year. It happens with Miami. So it behooves them to stay with them.
I think they did a good job of sort of replenishing the farm system this training camp. I mean, even though Champagny had no chance of getting the two-way or on this roster spot, he had impressive moments. RJ Hampton really good in his preseason finale Friday night. Like he was obviously injured for some of these games, and you and I talked like we're not really sure what that means for him. An injury for a two-way guy, if one of these other guys pops, that could be it, right? Like we've seen this, you could churn those guys. But he had a really nice night in Miami's last preseason game in Houston. So RJ Hampton is the other guy on the two-way spot. All right, let's move on to our bold predictions for the season. The idea here, David, is to make them bold. I got to be honest, I really don't know how bold mine are. We were talking right before we started recording here. We thought we could rank the boldness of our predictions, not only just discussing why we're making these predictions, but rank the boldness of these predictions based on almost a Scoville hot sauce type of scale. So we've got 3 different kinds of predictions, right? We've got Tabasco predictions, a little peppery, a little light, not burning hot, not necessarily very bold, but just a little bit of seasoning, just something that gets you talking. So we get the bold, light prediction. We got a habanero kind of middle boldness prediction. And then we've got our Carolina Reaper, which is the boldest and spiciest of all predictions. Okay. So you've made 3 predictions. I've made 3 predictions. Why don't you go ahead and start with your first prediction?
Okay.
I'll tell you if it's spicy or not.
I'll start off with the most Tabasco-esque of mine, I think. I think Bam Adebayo wins Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay.
I think he's got to do enough this year. I think their narratives are going to start changing. I don't know how, but I think we've seen this before. People kind of complain loudly enough. There's just enough of a little buzz there about what Bam does. And even though we just made this argument before, like 2 weeks ago, I feel like we just talked about this. He doesn't get the blocks. He doesn't get the steals. But we're going to see now what happens with Memphis, with Steven Adams missing for the year. Jaren Jackson Jr., the clear favorite after having won it last year. He's going to have a lot of those minutes at center. Is he going to get exposed a little bit for getting more playing time? Will he miss time due to injury because of having to carry a bigger load? Who knows? I think people are going to start to notice what it is that Bam does on a larger scale after what he did during the last year's postseason, and I think it's going to pay off in a Defensive Player of the Year award. So give me my ranking. What is that? Is that Tabasco-esque?
No, that's a habanero. That's a habanero take because you know what? Bam already has gotten snubbed for this award at least once. It feels like every time it's within his grasp or even he's earned it flat out, he doesn't get it. So I think that you making this prediction is actually more of a vote of confidence, not in Bam, because we know how great of a defender is, but on the voters. And that to me is a little bit, and that's why it is so bold, because I don't know that I would be so bold to have that confidence in the voters. However, David, I am exactly that bold because that was exactly one of my predictions as well. I also had Bam Adebayo finally winning Defensive Player of the Year. And you mentioned some of the other competition there. And I actually think the competition that Bam is going up against is exactly why he's going to win DPOY finally this season. I'm going to get into more details on that after this as we continue our bold predictions for the season. First, a word from our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You don't have to worry about buying tickets when it comes to Gametime. It's the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, concerts, comedy shows, theater events, anything you might be looking for near you. Gametime's got you covered. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat so you can see exactly what it is that you're getting. And not to mention their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets and makes things so easy for you. You're in town, you want to catch a show, whether it's a comedy show, a game, a concert, who knows? Maybe your favorite band happens to be in town. You look up the Gametime app, boom, just a couple clicks away. You find the best seats available. You can see exactly where you're sitting, whatever venue they're playing at, and you can make the purchase with just a few taps of your phone. So easy. Makes things so simple for you. It takes all the guesswork out of finding the right price because Gametime has the best price available for you. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
He doesn't know how to spell locked by now. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day the season is starting. We are here after every game during the week with our post-game shows, our credit cookies, our blame pie, our breakdowns, our game notes, our biggest takeaways. So make sure you stick with us all season long. The only Miami Heat daily podcast. All right. So we left off on the Bam Adebayo Defensive Player of the Year award. I agree with you. That was one of my bold predictions. I do think that Bam wins Defensive Player of the Year. And you look at FanDuel's odds here for the favorites. Bam has the 5th best odds on FanDuel to win Defensive Player of the Year, and I love it in terms of a value bet. It's at plus 1,200, right? So Jaren Jackson's at plus 500, Evan Mobley's at plus 700. You got Anthony Davis at plus 850. You got Giannis at plus 850, and then you got Bam at plus 1,200. Also, Victor Wembanyama at plus 1,200.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, let's calm down. I mean, that's rookie hype. That's Vegas just trying to get some free money out of that. I get it. But in terms of the realistic guys, those are the top 5 realistic guys. So here's the problem. And I'm just going to go one by one through them. And I'm going to tell you why those guys won't win it. And then we'll get to Bam. Okay. We'll start at the top with Jaren Jackson Jr. He's not going to win it twice in a row. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is a phenomenal defender. That's not a hot take at all. That's less than Tabasco, right? And if you want to sit here and tell me that Jaren Jackson Jr. is the best defender in the NBA, reasonable people have that opinion. That's fine. I'm not going to argue over that. That's not to me interesting. All right. But you look at the past 15 years, past 20 years, guys who have won Defensive Player of the Year 2 times in a row, 2 seasons in a row. We're talking about Rudy Gobert, 08, 09, I think. Yeah. I mean, one of the best rim protectors of all time, Rudy Gobert. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr. is great. He's not Rudy Gobert. Before Rudy Gobert was Kawhi, San Antonio Spurs peak Kawhi-octopus stuff there. One of the great perimeter defenders, basically revolutionized the game in terms of perimeter defense. You had Kawhi win it twice in a row when he was with San Antonio. And before that, you had Orlando Magic in the NBA Finals because of Dwight Howard. He won it 3 times in a row. Jaren Jackson Jr. is awesome. He's not Dwight. He's not Kawhi. He's not Rudy Gobert. And so I just think the odds of him winning it twice in a row are very low because you look at the company that he would be keeping, and as good of a defender as I think he is not far and away, bar none, the best defender and a Hall of Fame level defender like those guys were in their time. So that's why Jaren Jackson Jr. is not going to win twice in a row. Evan Mobley's right there. I just don't think he's ready to win Defensive Player of the Year. No, I don't think that there's going to be a ton of immediate push behind a Cleveland player. Unfortunately, I think that's part of it. And I also don't think he plays the right position enough, right? We just saw how clunky it was between him and Jared Allen in the playoffs last year. I think that clunkiness is going to kind of push voters away from that whole situation. And I also wonder if Cleveland defensively is going to be as good as they were last year after people kind of figure out the 2 big lineup that they have, given that their backcourt is Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. There is a lot heaped on Evan Mobley's plate, and that's a reason why he may win it. And he should be among these contenders. But I don't love that situation and how it's playing out in Cleveland right now. So I'm going to take him off the board.
He's a dark horse for me because I think a lot of people think their offense is going to be so good that they're going to have a high win total during the regular season because they are, quote, built for a regular season kind of campaign. And if that's the case and they eclipse 55, 56 wins, then you look at what they do defensively, and if he's their best defensive player, and I think that's pretty clear that he is, then he starts to get a little bit more consideration in that regard. But
totally,
I mean,
but there's a lot of expectations for him in his third year. So if he individually does not reach expectations on either end of the court, I think that will push some voters away. I think those.
And he's young enough too. Like he doesn't have to win one now. This isn't like this isn't a lifetime achievement award or something like that. And
Anthony Davis is third. I just don't think he's going to play 65 games. Let's remember, you have to meet that 65 game minimum. I think that's a pretty safe bet to say Anthony Davis won't play 65 games. And I don't think that he wants to play 65 games. I think Anthony Davis and LeBron want to be healthy for the playoffs like they were last year, right? They kind of figured out their formula. So I think AD's not even going to be eligible. Then you've got Giannis. Here's the problem with Giannis. Again, if you want to argue that Giannis is the best defender in the NBA, I'm not going to argue that with you. That's fine. If that's your opinion, reasonable people have that take. That's okay. I don't think Milwaukee defensively as a unit is going to be good enough. When you have Drew Holiday going out and Damian Lillard coming in, is that defense going to be top 5? No way. Is that defense going to be top 10? I think now that's kind of what we're talking about. It sounds like they're going to start Malik Beasley at the other guard spot. So if you've got Damian Lillard, Malik Beasley, Giannis, obviously great. Brook Lopez, obviously great. And then and Chris Middleton, who's just not the same defender as he was before.
No, Lopez is older. Middleton is older. Like that's a team that's kind of due for a regression. And I'm not, this sounds like hating speech here, but I think it's,
I think it's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, you've got players that are aging. You've got, Drew carried a lot of the brunt of their point of attack defense, and he was switchable too. And
his ability to fight over those screens, and he is the best in the NBA at fighting over screens, is why you were able to funnel everything to Brook Lopez and Giannis at the basket. Damian Lillard dies on these screens. Malik Beasley dies on these screens in a way that Drew Holiday didn't, and so that whole funnel system just sort of breaks at the very point of at the point of attack. So I don't know, like Milwaukee for Giannis to be a real contender here has to be a top 5 defense, I think, in defensive rating, and I just don't think they're going to get anything close to that. So that eliminates everybody, and then you've got Bam sitting there, right? And I think Miami's going to have a great defense because they always do. Like offensively, shaky, we have no idea. Defensively, they're going to be elite. And Bam is a big part of that, and I think he's going to play a lot of games. And I also think he's on a revenge tour, and I think he's going to actually stat chase a little bit this year and get those blocks. Right. I think he is.
Let's hear it. Let's move on to our next bold prediction. What do you got next?
I have that the Heat are going to have 2 All-Stars.
Oh, I've got an All-Star prediction.
Okay, make it.
All right. I think they're going to have 2 All-Stars, and neither of them will be Jimmy Butler.
Wow. So I went with the habanero take. You went straight to the Colombian Reaper take. I almost did it. I couldn't get myself there. But let's talk about the All-Stars. So the obvious 3 I think that we're talking about are Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler would obviously,
and Haywood Highsmith.
And then he made my joke before I did. Very good. Tyler Hero, I think, would be the other one, right? Is that who you're guessing makes it?
That is correct. Yes. I think he's on a revenge tour, despite all the talk that, no, I'm just taking it in stride. It's all good. Yeah. Like we've seen an aggressive version of Tyler in the preseason, and I have no doubt that that's going to carry over into the regular season. And I think, again, when you look at like the way people thought about him and dragged his name through the mud over the offseason and have done that for a couple seasons, I think you start to see kind of like fashion, right? Like what was trash in the 80s all of a sudden comes back and everybody loves it. Like now I think Tyler's going to go through that up and down cycle where everybody thought he was crap, and now all of a sudden people are going to watch him more closely and go, hey, you know what? It's not actually that bad. And actually he's pretty good. And he has a couple big games, and next thing you know, you realize, he might actually be a fringe all-star candidate. Right. And if he starts building momentum, by the time January rolls around, I think he gets an all-star nod along with Bam Adebayo.
You know what? Bell bottoms, underrated. We should have been wearing those the whole time. So I kind of went through this whole exercise looking at what the East All-Stars could even be, right? So at that guard spot, it's loaded, right? You've got Damian Lillard coming in. Right. That means he's going to end up – you do have Kyrie going out. Kyrie obviously went out in the trade deadline last year, but he was a starter for the East in the final. So you basically could swap Kyrie and Damian Lillard, right? They're going to get a ton of public vote. They're going to be named All-Star starters. It's just going to happen. So Lillard and Donovan Mitchell, I kind of have penciled in the East as your backcourt, starting backcourt in the East All-Star game. And then beyond that, you're looking at guys like Tyrese Halliburton, You're looking at Drew Holiday still in Boston. You're looking at Trae Young from Atlanta. We'll see what happens with James Harden. I think he's kind of eliminated himself from the All-Star conversation like he did last year, but it's worth bringing him up. Yeah. Darius Garland, Jalen Brunson, who didn't make the All-Star team last year. I would bet all the money I have that he's going to make the All-Star team this year. You got that New York public vote. Like he's an awesome player. Like he's going to get in. You got Jordan Poole coming in. Like he's going to put up a lot of shots. There's a potential for him to be a 25-point per game scorer. There's going to be that.
I don't know what a close to last week.
But yeah.
What a close last week. The ups and downs of Jordan Poole in 2-game sets. That was amazing.
You got Cade Cunningham coming back for Detroit. He's a very good player, former number 1.
Would he be a guard? He is a guard, right? I guess
he's a guard. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you got Tyler Hero, obviously. So it's pretty loaded. I think the Heat are going to get 2 All-Stars. I wanted to go very bold and go the Tyler Hero route. I think it's going to be Jimmy and Bam. I just think it will be. I've got Dame, Donovan Mitchell, Jason Tatum, Giannis, and Joel Embiid just sort of in pen as the East starters. I just think that's probably what's going to happen, barring injury. I've got Bam pretty much in pencil. I think he's just one of those guys that is going to make the All-Star team every year now. Jaylen Brown is another one of those guys. And I honestly have Halliburton almost in Sharpie at this point. I just think he's going to be 20 points and 12 assists for the next 4 years. Halliburton?
I
made it last year.
I know, but I think it's a part of the fresh trade buzz or something like that. I don't know. I don't think the larger fan base is going to vote for him. And I know he'll get votes for amongst players and stuff like that, but he has to have another monster season. And I don't know if they can duplicate last year's success. I know a lot of people are high on Indiana. I'm not so sure where they stand right now, to be honest with you. Okay. And as far as the Heat are concerned, I don't think Jimmy plays enough games to make an All-Star.
Well, that was the problem last year, right? Is he didn't play. I think he'll play enough maybe in the beginning of the season, I guess, is my bet. But you're saying no, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It's impossible to predict there.
No. That's why these are bold predictions.
Yeah. Wild guesses. Other guys, you've got Pascal Siakam, you've got Julius Randle there at that forward spot. You got Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner who can make a push. Kind of more fringe, but I have him on my list.
No, I got you.
So I like Jimmy and Bam to get in. I would love it for Tyler to get in, but we'll see. Yours much more bold than mine. All right. We're going to move on with our final predictions for the season here in a second. I've got one that's, I think, pretty spicy, David, and it has to do with a trade. We're going to talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. When you place a $5 bet, that's $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action, especially with the NBA season right on the way. Place a little bet on who wins Defensive Player of the Year or who gets the All-Star nod. There's lots of different options.
Just do it. And Miami at 44.5 wins, go the over.
Absolutely. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options like we talked about, spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. Go visit FanDuel.com and use /LockedOn to kick off the NFL and NBA season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and NBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. We are going to do our over-unders tomorrow, I think, is the plan, David.
Who knows what happens in between now and then, but yes, I agree.
That's the idea. I do know something that's going to happen this year, and it's my next bold prediction.
Oh.
Kyle Lowry will not finish the season on the Miami Heat.
Wow. Yeah, I thought about Lowry as a prediction, but my prediction is so lukewarm, and it's that he just stays with the roster. I'd see the exact opposite.
You got a milk take, not even Tabasco. You just got dairy. So what's mine? What's mine? Is mine habanero? Is mine Carolina Reaper?
I'd say jalapeno. A little bit under habanero. Yeah, under habanero.
That's fine.
Yeah, under habanero. Not quite mid-level. Not quite Tabasco. Just mid-level.
Just a little jalapeno. All right, that's fine. So I don't think Kyle Lowry finishes the season on the Heat. I think that his expiring contract is going to be very valuable, actually, to another team.
Sure.
Around the February trade deadline. You've got the second apron coming into play already, but more punitive restrictions happening next year. You're going to have a lot of teams looking forward. A lot of teams by February that might say, you know what? maybe we're kind of out of this thing. Teams that were thinking, okay, maybe we're going to be up, like right now we're thinking, hey, let's try to compete for the play-in, right?
Yep.
And then by February they're like, yeah, we're kind of 10 games under 500. It's just not really happening for us this time. Let's get off some long-term money and set us up this offseason to create some space and maybe make a move to get to where it is that we want to be. I think Kyle Lowry is a prime candidate to get traded. We saw this last year with Russell Westbrook, and that's not with all the Westbrook stuff that comes with Russell Westbrook. Kyle Lowry, you bring him into your locker room, you say, hey, cool, be Kyle Lowry for a little while, and then go into free agency and do your thing. I think the Heat are going to also have a need to move him, quite frankly. I think because they're going to need to supplement this roster with something. I don't know that they know what that something is yet, and that is fine. I think you play this out for a couple months and say, all right, what are our weak points? Do we really need to add maybe a more athletic player at that point guard spot? Do we need to add more size in the front court? What do we need here? So I think Lowry gets moved.
Okay, I mean it's not unreasonable. That's why I think you're making a lot of listeners happy just by even uttering the possibility of him being traded. But we'll see. Is there anything he could do at this point to avoid being in that kind of he's not going to have an all-star level, even a fringe all-star level at this point in his career. Could he be good enough where the kind of trade buzz starts wearing off, or do you think his contract is too valuable to pass up the opportunity for a possible upgrade?
I mean, the thing is, if he plays really well, you almost redefine the kind of asset he is, because now he's a really good player on an expiring contract. So if there's a contender out there that needs point guard help, you know what I mean? And they don't have to worry about that long-term money. Now we're talking about.
But wouldn't Miami keep him then?
I think obviously that I mean, it depends on what their record is. You and I think that the Heat will be pretty good this year. I think they'll be a playoff team. So yeah, there's a world where the Heat are just like, look, we need this guy. We don't really like Drew Smith. He's not really developing or whatever. We like Tyler Hero more in an off-ball role, and Josh Richardson really isn't a point guard. So we just need Kyle Lowry. And if you trade Kyle Lowry, it's just really hard to trade a player for a player at the same position. So I actually think that's why it's a pretty bold prediction, is because the Heat have so little help at that point guard spot that trading Kyle Lowry actually might be tougher to do. You want a more bold prediction? You want the real Carolina Reaper version of that prediction? I don't know if I believe it, but I'm going to make it.
All right, let's hear it.
Well, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to tell you what I thought. The Carolina Reaper one was that Caleb Martin won't finish the season on the Miami Heat. That was my Carolina Reaper level bold prediction. I couldn't get there, though, because I still think he does. And they just say, you know what, whatever happens in free agency happens. But
we'll take our chance.
Yeah, exactly. What's your final prediction, David?
Miami's three-point shooting depends on one player, Kevin Love. I think his ability to knock down the three-point shot consistently will pretty much define Miami's chances of regular season success. Not postseason success, but regular season success. And depending on how well he shoots the three, that's where Miami's three-point shooting goes, is as good as Kevin's goes. And I think that's a little unfair, but I think we saw this during the preseason. He shot terribly during the preseason. And our hope is that he won't shoot that badly during the regular season. But I think it puts pressure on everybody else when he does not hit that three-point shot. And now all of a sudden you have to see Tyler be a little bit more aggressive. Mm-hmm. Maybe Kyle be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe anybody coming off the bench says, you know what? Kevin's not knocking them down. It's too valuable a weapon. We have to have some three-point shooting. And next thing you know, 1 for 3 goes 1 for 8, and then 2 for 11, and next thing 4 for 17. And then you basically would have what Miami had last year, which is not a very good three-point shooting season. I think Tyler's three-point shooting is going to be pretty consistent and even slightly better than it was last year. But I think Kevin's is really going to define Miami's season.
Duncan Robinson playing a bigger role this year because there's less people in front of him now. I think that's
we've seen what Duncan can do.
Haywood Highsmith, Caleb Martin. Yeah. I think Caleb Martin will have a bounce back year during the regular season. He was on fire in the playoffs. The regular season was bad for him from a three-point shooting perspective. So I'm with you on that. Is there maybe again bolder version of his prediction? Like Kevin Love's not in the rotation by the end of the season. If the three-point shot's not going in, that's what we might be talking about here.
No, I wanted to go there. I was going to say that it was going to basically come down to Miami's three-point shooting falls into one position or depends on one position, because it's either Kevin Love or Haywood Highsmith in his place. Yeah.
Or Jovic even, you could argue.
Possibly.
No Jovic predictions on this. No Jovic is an all-star predictions.
Too wild card, man. You can't predict the weather, dude. That's all it comes down to.
Can't predict what this rotation is going to look like even. I got one more bonus prediction for you before we head out. the play-in tournament. I wanted to do something because it's new. I also kind of hate the play-in tournament, so I'm sort of like hating myself for doing this.
Every time we see an advertisement for it or an announcement at Kaseya Center, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, this year. That's right. Like I have to remind myself.
Everybody's like, what is it again? And it's like, it's a tournament, but it's also during the season, so it's not really a tournament. And then it just becomes a tournament sometime. And sometimes some teams are in it. There's a knockout round, and then you go to Vegas, and nobody really knows what you win.
I'm excited.
Yeah, get excited by this. It's very confusing, and there's nothing in it for the fans. You guys should watch more regular season basketball. It's basically what the NBA is telling us. You know what? You're right. It's stupid. I'm not even going to make a prediction. I hate it. It's dumb.
That was short.
Yep. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app every day, or stick around all week long. We will have our over-under show later this week. And then, of course, the season starts Wednesday night. We will be at Kaseya Center for the season opener against the Detroit Pistons with a post-game show right after that. So, everybody, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.